goes to the second part of learning, which is about 25% of the world only learns from auditory. So, you know, if you think about it, you know, maybe people were forced into reading because that's really what they had as an option to them. And maybe now the diversification of video to written content is actually more of a representation of how the human mind and brain really works. So the video actually is there because that's what people actually want to learn. It's easier for them to learn and to gravitate to something they understand. And those who are still reading are doing it because that's what they're more comfortable doing. And we're actually just self-selecting already. And we didn't have that option before. Now we've got the option to do it. And that might be a factor. I didn't mention the last 5% because they're a very hard group of people to target, but that's the, but Yuri, do you remember what they are?
The last 5%? I don't.
Yeah. Kinesthetic.
Kinesthetic, of course.
Right. The emotional types that are, you know, yes. I see what you're saying. Yeah, right. So I see what you're saying means I'm a visual person. I hear what you're saying. I feel your point. I mean, that just tells you exactly. So you can tell quite quickly, you know, how someone likes to learn or be given information by how they speak. So absolutely. You can take that away as and all of our listeners for that matter can take that away and use that on your colleagues and friends when they say, oh, I see your point. You go, you like videos more than you like reading books, huh?
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
So you've studied NLP.
Yuri and I both have, amongst other things.
Fantastic, great, yeah. I'm really into it, big time.
Yeah.
And love it.
Yeah, so you didn't tell us how you actually got into crypto itself, though.
So how I got into crypto, like all good things in life, by sheer fluke and accident. Mm-hmm. And that was because a friend saw a tweet from David Siegel from 2030 Pillar Project saying, do you know anyone who can help with some PR who's good? She recommended me. I spoke to David, it would have been about a year and a half ago now. He was coming to London to give some talks about blockchain, and he's got a talk which is about an hour long, which says, this talk is going to change your life. And basically it's talking about all of the big institutions, the big buildings in cities, all owned by banks, insurance companies, law firms, and how blockchain is going to change everything, how they've all been hacked, they've all had their issues, and how blockchain will change this.
And you're referring to David Siegel from Pillar, the project that's ranked around 135 on CoinMarketCap.
Yeah, and what's great is we had,
fantastic.
And it is fantastic because they are, they've got fantastic vision. We worked on a multidisciplinary project, Zoom meetings every day, when we were obviously live in the run-up to being live, with people calling in from all areas of the globe. It was fantastic, and everyone's voice was heard, and I found that so exciting. To be fair, it was also high risk because we did the job knowing that we'd only get paid at the end if it was successful. And I have to be honest and say, I didn't even think that it would not be successful. I really didn't even factor that in.
And it does not mean that if people come to you now, they should expect pay at the end, because that's not what you're advertising and offering here.
Unfortunately, I'm not, because I've learned the hard way since. Yeah, I've learned the hard way, you know, as we all do. But it was fantastic. And to me, the really, really fantastic thing is blockchain and cryptocurrency. That's really exciting. ICOs, you know, the ICOs area space is almost like a fun fair. It's a bit of a sideshow in itself. It's almost like a substitute for crowdfunding. We all can see that regulation's going to come along and make things like bounties, as they are at the moment. Some of them will no doubt be illegal or certainly stamped upon, because from in the marketing area there are sort of questions being asked. So basically it's a bit like, you know, we're playing the piano in the Last Chance Saloon at the moment, and you know, some of us actually, I'd say the ICOs as we have them now, you know, there's already such a change. So for example, a year ago, you know, it's quite okay not to have KYC. You know, you're hard pushed to find an ICO that's not having KYC at the moment. You know, it's so difficult, because then how do you deal with your assets once you've got them? And the banks don't really like it. So I think it's fascinating that all of this is changing, but actually there's so much good going on as well.
Sure.
There's so much good. And
what would you say some of the, what are some of the best and some of the worst things you've sort of encountered in the world of the crypto projects you've worked with, and in whatever way you want to spell it out? Just a couple of quick highlights.
Sure. Okay. That's a good question. I would say the highlight, there are a number of highlights actually, but possibly when we're working on Pillar, our remit was very much mainstream media, digital media, getting the message out there. And I think in David's super bright and is very good in terms of directing copy. And we just said, look, David, what we need is something really simple. Just give tips on how people should invest in cryptos. Let's just give 10 tips. And that got massive coverage. And one particular newspaper has actually virtually repeated the same copy about 4 times because nobody else is saying it's simple. People want simplicity in many cases.
Right. And too much of crypto is too complicated and too tacky for the average person.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So you've done the same thing we've done, which is tried to, appeal to the masses to help people get started in crypto and make them aware of things rather than coming at all of it as talking nimble-wimbles and honeypots and people well, what was that?
Yeah. Exactly. And when you say to people, well, look, you've got assets, you might have property and you might have pension and various things in the, cryptos are very good. It's spreading your risk. It's good to be into crypto. So I think that simplicity is much needed. Now, thinking aloud, there probably is a real need for people within the crypto community to get together and do something proactive with the consumer. And I think some of the things, funny enough, Flashcoin is a good example. What they're doing is they're in a very good place doing good work. Yeah. And they're probably in a position to educate people about cryptos in general. And I'd say that's what's needed.
Yeah, because, absolutely.
For what we discussed at the start. But in terms of bad, to be totally honest, I know some really lovely people we work with. We work with some guys out of the States called Coin Locker Group for video influencing. They're fantastic. They're just brilliant. But there are some very aggressive agencies out there, very aggressive. And they seem to be based in the States. And I had a very unfortunate incident, which was so bad it was funny. But I was at home and it was late at night and I had a Skype message from a client to say, can you speak now? I said, well, okay. And I got on the call. And what I didn't realize was somebody from this other agency was on the call too.
Oh, how terrible.
And I had no idea, but basically the client was taking verbatim the point of view of the very expensive, ridiculously expensive, and quite frankly, not necessarily very efficient agency, and then poo-pooing anything coming from honest people, i.e. myself. And I ended up having this bizarre conversation where basically this agency said, well, there's no such thing as unpaid media anymore. Everything's sponsored. I just thought, what planet are they on? This is crazy.
That's terrible.
And it's just such a crazy thing.
So they were promoting basically paid for articles so that they could make their cut on the commission rather than doing legitimate press coverage. That's like they got covered because they want to be covered, not because someone's paid for it.
Exactly. Right. And that whole area is very grey. So I feel for clients. Clients are vulnerable. There are a lot of clients in this ICO space where there are some very, very aggressive agencies out there who you just need to be careful, because how does they know? Certain people will gravitate towards the ones who've got 100 ICOs under their belt and think they know better, but actually they don't necessarily. And there are ways of these marketing agencies charging ridiculous sums. I mean, ridiculous. Literally, I'd say 4 times the usual market rate for work that's nothing spectacular. But of course, the difficulty is that some of the, let's just say that people raising funds can be vulnerable because they really don't know where to turn. And nobody wants to fess up to being on the receiving end of bad practice either. No. And this is the honest truth. Nobody wants to say, I've been scammed by a marketing agency. But that in itself, we all know, I can think of 20%, 30% of the people I've worked with have had scams of some kind.
I mean,
and they're
for
really
ICOs
bright.
I've worked with, I've also encountered that there are certain, I'll call them marketing, websites that promise,
yes.
pay us $1 million and you're going to get X million, whatever's, and we're going to then put banner ads out for you and everything else.
Of
And
course.
they're complete scams. You can see it because you get thousands of bots hitting your website when you're looking at Google Analytics. You can't find a banner for them anywhere. And you're asking yourself, what are we paying this money for? And I've seen one ICO very sadly spend their entire marketing budget on 3 of these companies that all had different services promised. Not one of them delivered anything. They'd spent their whole marketing budget. And then they came to me and said, is there anything you can do to help us figure out how to solve it? And I said, how much have you got? And they said, nothing. And I said, I'd go raise some more money and start again.
Right.
And I really did try to figure out how to help them because it was just an honest, he called me up and said, look, you're out there, you're public, you've got a lot of things going on, just give us some insights. And we spent a couple of times on calls, global calls with their whole team. And I basically said to them, don't give up, just go back, dig deep, figure out how you can come up with some money, and let's figure out how to restart this thing, because what you guys have is a good idea. And it was a sad situation because they gave up. Some of the team members just said, oh, we're not going to go through it again. And there was, I think, one guy left who was a real believer in the whole thing still and said, I want to go ahead. And one guy who was kind of half in, half out, and the other 3 guys just bailed. And I said to the guy left, I said, you have such a good idea, you don't need those guys then. I'm sorry to say, if they're going to walk out because they're just disheartened by what's happened in the marketplace, it is sad. But don't let the scammers and the users of the world take away what you've got, which is better than what they had. Go for it.
Yeah.
But
right.
he never got back on his feet to it. In fact, I haven't been in touch with him for a while, so I don't know what he's up to. But I have to say to all of the people listening to what you're saying, Tina, and what we're saying, please, if you take one piece of advice, don't give up just because of some scammy stuff. In fact, don't sign up to things unless you check and validate them. If you don't know, check with us. We're all here. Yeah. We know what's right, what's wrong.
Yeah.
I'm sure, Tina, you wouldn't mind getting a few leads or a few calls out of it. Yuri and I certainly don't mind being contacted as well. So don't just go out there and sign up for things if you don't know what they are. Check first, because there is a lot of scammy stuff out there and a lot of dodgy agencies when it comes to all the press and marketing for ICOs.
Right.
Rant,
so, Tina,
rant finished.
Yes.
Right. In your experience, what are some red flags? So we talked about like what's good, what's bad. Like, are there some obvious red flags that people who are looking for marketing agencies who don't really know what to look for will go, nope, terrible.
Yeah, good. What a good question.
Yeah.
So from the top, I would say now with the space that we're in, a red flag is if the team in particular, the core team and advisors, if they do not have any previous ICO fundraising experience. Why? Because it's a bit like being on an expedition. You have to be slightly nuts to do it.
Right.
Once you set off, you have got to have everything you need for that whole expedition, because from the start of the pre-sale right through to the end, you've got to have stamina. You've got to be really strong. It's very interesting. I completely agree with what you say about resilience. Mm-hmm. You need massive resilience.
Yeah.
And you need to be prepared to be almost, people in exhaustion mode because of all the testing, all the risks, all the scams, their sites being scammed and everything. People are in a state of shock at the end of an ICO, and that's when it's gone well. So you're right. You need people with the experience. Mm-hmm. I think that I think a good analogy is a bit like football. So we've got the World Cup, and you don't need to like football to love the World Cup, surely. You've just got to love the fact that you've got some of these little guys who are beating the big guys, and the matches, just the whole atmosphere. I love it, and I'm not a great fan of football, but I love the World Cup. Those teams that do well, they gel together. They've worked together as a team.
Right.
And yes, they might come from, because of the way football is, and you've got stars coming from all over the place geographically. It's those people who've gelled and worked together in a project well who succeed, because it's about the mental attitude. It doesn't matter, the mental attitude is key. So look at the teams who've worked together. And when you see teams that have worked together as a business and they've succeeded